I'd very much like to welcome Roger Rowett. This is as part of our Wellbeing Conference series. And Roger is the director of Who To, Their Me, and he's going to talk to us about a person-centered planning and outcomes recording app. And it's been piloted, I think, in a range of areas with learning disability, across children's services, and also in employment services. So quite an exciting initiative, and really interesting to hear about your work. So thank you very much, Roger. If people do have questions, if they can add them to the chat, we can, Roger can answer them at the end of his input, although I believe there's going to be a little bit of interaction before that during the course of your session. So welcome, thank you very much, Roger.
Thanks, Alison. Okay, hello everyone. It's a bit strange because I don't know who's there, so there might be one or two people I know, I'm not sure, but I'm guessing most of you won't know me. I'm based in North Wales in Denbighshire, and just very briefly about me, because it sort of links to the app. We were chatting about this earlier actually. I've originally worked a lot of time in the voluntary sector for the YMCA for 10 years and working with young people. And I've worked in a range of other services for people with learning disability as well. And after sort of working within services, I've also worked for in inspectorates in Wales. So I used to work for I used to work, if anybody might remember, local authorities used to inspect services before the Care Standards Inspectorate came along. So I used to work for Clwyd's Registration Inspection Unit, and then moved over into CSIW, Care Standards Inspectorate for Wales, and had sort of experience of inspecting a range of services, then moved over to Estin. So I worked as an HMI for Estin, Education Services, and I've been working for myself for about the last 15 years. And it was through that work, and a lot of my work was doing independent reviews of services, and it was more latterly looking at the challenges services were having. Predominantly, one was in relation to engaging people in a plan that they felt ownership of. And that was particularly in relation to young people who were at NEET, not in education, employment or training. And, you know, people had plans for them, but very hard to engage them, and that they had ownership of that plan. And my thinking was that if people don't have ownership of their plan, then they're less likely to respond to any goals that are set, like us all, actually. So if other people set goals for us, I think often we're less likely to respond to them. So that was one side of things. And also, and I guess partly through my inspection experience, the challenge for organisations to evidence the impact of their work, and particularly around soft outcomes. So perhaps like some of you, I've certainly been involved in working with young people, for example, around improving self-confidence, self-esteem, sometimes getting out of bed in the morning, you know, to get to somewhere on time. And those things are really important, but it's very hard to measure them and evidence them. And it's that old thing of it's no good just doing a good job. Sadly, you've got to prove it as well. So it was through those experiences that the idea for this came about. So some of you may have been to Nick Andrews' presentation, which was the last presentation last week. I did attend it, and Nick and I have known each other for quite a few years. And so we've done work together. So he's sort of a colleague and he's a friend as well. And for those of you who weren't there, it was called From Metrics to Meaning. And it was looking at how we measure impact and outcomes. And it was a really interesting conversation. And I made notes during that chat presentation. And some of the things I wrote down are on the left there. So the challenge of knowing and understanding the wider context, the complexity of what we're looking at. Things aren't simple, are they? And that's what provides one of the challenges, I think. It's all about the story. I mean, Nick, as you know, Nick and the Deep Project very much focus on storytelling and the impact of people's stories. And I guess you using old style language, you know, a lot of us are used to providing case studies, which are stories essentially. But the power of those stories, it's about individual circumstances. and people also saying that numbers are most useful if they're a catalyst for a conversation, and I certainly believe that, and certainly within this system, numbers are used. So a little bit like Outcome Star, I'll say a little bit more about that later, but people have conversations about how far people have travelled in terms of progression, and they measure that through, as Welsh Government recommend, through a 1 to 10 scale. So we use that. But for us, the main use of those numbers is as a catalyst for a conversation with people. It's about keeping it live, was a comment that somebody made, and this is very much a live system, and it's what sets it apart from most other systems that are out there, I would suggest. Not all, there are some other similar ones, but most are, you're taking snapshots rather than it being a live system. Outcomes can change with the person's journey. It's a moving target. I think the key point links to one of the points above, which people were saying, actually, the numbers and the stories are important. So numbers can be important too. So it's the quantitative and the qualitative information. And if you get a rounded picture and feed in both that type of data, then that can be useful. It's not linear. You have to have a system that can unpick that. And also, Nick mentioned the friend not foe guidance, and it's in draft form at the moment. And he actually did say that we're going to look at whether people could get a copy of that. I have got a draft copy and it's really good. So if people want to try and seek that out, that's being done with the Social Care Wales, but it is very much in draft at the moment. So that was the starting point for me. I'm picking up on some of the things that people said about it's the numbers and it's the story. I mean, it reinforced for me that the journey we're going on with this app is going in the right direction. Now, this is the bit where I thought, again, those of you who are in Nick's meeting, it was a sort of in a meeting format. So people could split into groups and have chats and things. But so we haven't got that with this this is a sort of webinar presentation. But if you could just have a look at that, hopefully people are looking on reasonably large screens. This is something that we've produced recently and we've done some consultation on, and there's been some really interesting feedback. We've adapted it based on the consultation. So the scale you see there, which we're sort of calling at the moment a PCP, person centered planning scale, it looks at the range of what's going on out there from level 0 to level 4. So I'm not going to read it all out, but for example, well, at the top, it just defines some of the terms that are being used. So individual is the person who's being supported and or their representative if there's they haven't got capacity or limited capacity. Personal outcomes from Social Care Wales point of view is what a person wants to achieve, which I always think is a bit confusing because an outcome for me is when you've achieved it, although Scottish Government use the term the end result or impact of activities. So it's used in both those senses. And I think there's a lot of confusion out there over that word actually. And profile I've pulled that out of English guidance, and it's the person's strengths and capabilities and what support might be available from a wider support network. But it is, people probably familiar, with the concept of a one-page profile, a snapshot of an individual, and we use that within the system, and it's a strength-based profile. But at level 0, and I've seen this certainly in, for example, homes for older people I've inspected, there's no profile of a person, and there's no other information in the service support plan, they call it care plan, about what matters and what's important to the individual beyond their needs as identified by the service. So sadly, I still see that out there. Probably more often it's level 1 where they have a limited profile, particularly done at the beginning when they first come into the service, use that term. But then really there's no review of that, so it's very static. And then I'm not going to read through the rest, but at level 4, it goes right through to people having real ownership of their profile, and also their personal outcomes, identifying their outcomes and recording and reviewing their progress, actually involved in that recording and reviewing of their progress against their outcomes. And then that information goes to inform the service support plan that's provided by the organisation. So that's level 4. Now, I'd be interested in, if you could just, I'd be interested in people's experiences. I've said what my experience is, and I guess my experience is probably that most services are around the level 1 or 2. Learning disability services tend to be more advanced, and that's for a number of reasons, I think. Often staff have more time to spend with the individuals they're supporting than in older people's services. And also within services to younger people as well, within children's homes, for example, they have more time, and often they are more at level 2, sometimes maybe 3 as well. So in the chat, and I can't see that at the moment, but I know Alison's going to sort of reflect back some of your comments. Could people just say what their experience is very briefly? You know, is it mostly around whatever level you think? And where did you see that? Which type of service was it in, based on your experiences? It'd be interesting to hear back from people.
Okay, so if people, can just type in the chat. Yes, here we are. So Yvonne Hutchinson-Ruff has said, in Team Around the Family, here we are 3 going on to 4.
Excellent. And interestingly, I'll just throw in, we're going to be doing a pilot around Team Around the Family in Denbighshire, and some really interesting thoughts around how that could work, about everybody in the family having goals, not just one individual, and all supporting each other. So it's really interesting.
Anyone else want to add where they feel that they are? Yeah,
I'll move on if there aren't any more. I just
oh, there are a couple here now. Yvonne said she'd be interested in linking into your forthcoming work in Team Around the Family. And in terms of a learning disability service, Paul Mazarek said hello to you earlier, and he said there is a huge variable, so it's inconsistent.
Yeah, hi Paul. Yeah, I do know Paul. Okay, I'll move on. So it's, as I say, we're doing some consultation on this at the moment, and we're also, I've just started to work with a group that's based in Wrexham, and people with a learning disability, and they're actually going to input into producing a more friendly version of this, maybe cutting out some of the jargon that I've used, and also using some images as well. And then the idea is we'll develop this, and it'll be freely available, obviously, and people can actually use it as a catalyst for conversations with people and services about where they're at. And I think that could be a useful tool to help people move people up the scale. So that's, as I say, just a bit of work we're involved in at the moment. And I should say, because Paul mentioned, Paul Mazarak's here as well, we did a year of pilots in North Wales, and Paul was involved in those with learning disability services. So that was across 6 supported living houses for people with learning disability. And we learned lots. I mean, in some cases it worked, and in some cases really well, and in other cases it didn't work. But we learned a lot from that. And we're now, I'll say more about this later, we're now in the second phase of pilots on a new system. Okay, so what is it? I mean, some of you, I mean, within the information about the app that you might have seen, some of this is described, but if I'm asked for a one-liner, and if Alison used this phrase, it's an online person-centered planning and outcomes recording app. That's what it is. If, you know, if I just need to do the, I think they used to call it, or probably still do, the elevator pitch, don't they? You've got about 2 minutes in elevator to tell people what it is. So that's my 10-second elevator pitch. It's for anybody on targeted and planned programs of support. So that is anybody. If somebody is being supported and there is a plan in place, it should work for them. It includes, there's 2 bits to it. There's an online administration tools and the phone app. So people within the organisation can manage it all via their PC or laptop. And then individuals who are being supported and a circle of support, and I'll say more about this in a minute, can access an app via their phone, and the individual who's being supported can record their journey, and the circle of support, a bit like those who use Facebook, a bit like friends on Facebook, can see what they're doing and can give them positive reinforcement, and also throw in additional evidence of how they're progressing. Allows individuals to take as much control and ownership of the plan as possible, and it allows the organisation to evidence the impact of their support. So there are those two aspects which I touched on earlier. So for me, you know, it's sort of repeating really, but the challenges I saw were care plans tend to focus, and they still do in many cases, on what's important for individuals, using that really good person-centered planning tool, what's important to, what's important for, rather than what's important to them. I think both are important, but often the what's important to the individual gets missed. And again, it's difficult for organisations to capture the journey and what people have achieved, particularly with soft outcomes. So here to there starts from an individual's vision for their future, their motivation, strengths, and what's important, what matters to them. So there's a conversation that takes place and is recorded, and that's the profile, which records those things. So again, this is very much around conversations. And then once that's done, the individual, some goals are agreed, a circle of support's agreed, and then the individual captures their story of achievement through words and pictures. Again, just like you would on social media. So that just highlighting that process, creating a profile, strength-based, setting goals, and a circle of support. Circle of support is really important, and certainly people who've worked in learning disability services will be familiar with that phrase, but I think it's as relevant for anybody, again, including ourselves, if we were to use it, that we have a circle of people around us that have our interests, our best interests at heart, and are able to support us. Then they capture the story of achievement, and then finally they review that. So they have we call it a mentor, like a key worker, and that mentor works with them, sits down with them. I try to avoid the word review because it's formal, but they have a chat, but you are reviewing how they are progressing, and they review how they're progressing against that 1 to 10 scale, but also they're able to pull in this rich source of evidence in terms of all the pictures and comments they've made over the time since the last review, and that's what makes it a live system. So unlike Outcome Star, which some of you might be familiar with, where you sit down and you have the outcomes, usually what I call top-down outcomes, preset outcomes on the points of the star, and a 0 in the middle, 10 on the points, and then where are we on, you know, this particular outcome, where are we on that scale? And you meet them again a month later, where are you now? Hopefully they've moved, they might have gone back, but that's fine because that's all learning. But again, there's that conversation, those numbers prompt for a conversation. But again, what this system provides is when you're sitting down with the individual on the screen and you can have a screen open, you can pull in, you can see all the photographs and comments that have been made against that goal, which really provides that source of evidence to support your decision that a particular score or rating has been agreed on. Again, reviews, opportunity for the mentor individual to discuss progress. I've said everything on there already. That's what I often do, say things in advance, but it's about on the 1 to 10 scale. That's an actual, that photograph you can see there is a little snapshot of, well, how it looked on the screen in the prototype. Things of the new system has changed, but it'll be similar. And so that, you know, you mark where they are on the 1 to 10 scale. And on the right-hand side, you can actually see the posts that relate to that particular goal, and you can pull those in to the review, and then you can print off a report. So you can print off a report which said, this is what we discussed, this is how Roger's progressed. We've scored him a 7 because of A, B, and C, and here's some of the photographs showing some of the things Roger's done against his goal. So you can print off a report to show that. Circle of support. I mean, I think I've said it all really, but it's really about, you know, supporting the person on an ongoing basis. Again, not just little snapshots of meeting people, because it might include professionals, it might include family, it might include friends, colleagues, and particularly from a professional point of view, if you've got a number of services working with that individual, which is often the case, you might have CAMs involved, for example. There is a bit of a time saver here, because an identified CAMS worker could be looking at and commenting on how an individual is progressing between reviews. So in terms of promoting joined up working, like, you know, and that mantra of trying to promote that, this really does facilitate that joined up working amongst professionals. It's to focus on the strengths-based solution focus process. That's what it is. I mean, I'm not going to talk about this now, but some of you know me, may know that I work with an approach called appreciative inquiry, AI. I have done for the last 10 years. I use it. It's a way of thinking, it's a methodology, and that's underpinned this system as well. And it's on the basis that people respond best when the starting point is an appreciation of what they can do. That's not to say you ignore the problems, because often with AI, people think that's the case. You ignore the problems. You don't, but you reframe them to solutions. And again, a lot of you will be familiar with that solution-focused way of working. People are more energized through it, and it's goal setting is more effective when it centers on positive outcomes, what people want more of and not want less of. Sorry, just on that screen as well, that shows the mock-up of the app actually, and how it looked on a phone. And people can, there's tabs along the top there, and it's on the goal tab, so people can just as a glance see how they're progressing against their goals. They can also look historically by clicking on the graph symbol to see how they've progressed over time based on the ratings that they've got. Just one example of how the app works. Again, I've probably covered all this. It's familiar technology, being social media based. People are in control. It provides numbers and stories. And just to say a bit more about this, we use what I call a bottom-up approach to defining goals. So there's a lot of systems out there that, I mean, the National Outcomes Framework in Wales is an example where there are predefined areas, 8 predefined areas to rate yourself against. And from what I know of Outcome Star, they have, for example, Youth Star, and Youth Star has some predefined outcomes. With our system, it's bottom up. The outcomes are very much what the individual, how the individual expresses them, what they want for their life and how they express that. However, based on feedback from organisations, they said, that's great, but we have to actually report against these national outcomes and other KPIs. So we're building in an additional function within this system where you can tag the individual's personal goals against any external KPIs. So for example, the 8 national outcomes for within social care, you can tag an individual's bottom-up goals against those national outcomes, and you can report against those as well. So for me, that's the best of both worlds. It facilitates joined up working, I've spoken about. It's safe. So there are concerns often with systems like this around safety. This isn't like Facebook, where people have potentially hundreds of friends. The only people that see this information are the circle of support. You can also control how much individual supporters see. So by default, an individual supporter will see the story, you know, what people are doing, but they won't see, for instance, the goals or the actions, but you can choose to allow them to see those. So you have control over how much the circle of support sees. And it's fun and easy to use for the individual, because it's like social media. It's fun to use. And the reason most people use social media is they like using it. They like expressing what they're doing. As I say, there's a particular focus with this around people's goals, but people like sharing what they do, and people like likes. You know, on social media, there's a thumbs up button and you can click it, and people like that. So again, it's all about positives. I've had a lot of discussion with organisations about, well, we've already got a system for person-centred planning, you know, and we do some of this stuff. Maybe we don't do all of it, but we do some of it. But what I realised was that the systems they had were the organisation's plan. So the person-centred plan was effectively the organisation's plan. It was person-centred, but still the organisation had control and ownership of it. Well, control of it, ownership, the individual might feel some ownership of it. This is about giving the individual their own plan and a facility to record their information based on all those things in the orange boxes. It's my plan, it's my goals. They then feed into the organisation support plan, or whatever it's called. I'll use that term, support plan. They have systems and processes and people, they have staff who produce that, but it's very much the individual's plan feeding into that, and the outcome of that, and the output and the outcome, is that there is achievement and outcomes, and that's supported through the circle of support and the story that they're capturing. So I just thought that was a nice image to try and to be clear to organisations or services that this is different than the organisation support plan. This isn't instead of that, although you could use this instead of, actually, but generally you would have your own support plan, because there would be certain requirements around that in terms of legislation, some guidance sometimes. Okay, this is just, there's three of us involved in the organisation at the moment. I've mentioned about me. Stuart's the technical development, on technical development, and then we've got Vicky, who's based in North Wales, and she worked for Denbighshire County Council for many years and has left a couple of years ago, and she's working with us as well. Some of you may know Vicky Allen because she does quite a lot of work in training across Wales for social care. So Alison mentioned earlier, just to give you the bigger context, we were fortunate enough to be supported initially through the North Wales Transformation Project. And so we were given some money to help pilot the prototype of this system I mentioned earlier with 6 learning disability homes. We also piloted it with some children's homes as well, run by Woodlands in the Wrexham area. And again, as I said, some things worked, some things didn't, but that was fine. We learned lots. We then, towards the end of last year, applied for this Better Lives Close to Home competition. It was a phase 1 and a phase 2. We were successful. We were one of 5 organisations across Wales to be successful in phase 1, and we got some funding for that. And then the 5 had to compete to go through to phase 2, and we are one of 3 that are just going through to phase 2. And that runs through to the end of this year. So we're going to be piloting the new app, and it is a brand new app, with a number of organisations and local authorities. So at the moment that includes Denbighshire. We've got 2 services in Denbighshire, Work Support and Team Around the Family. It's actually the therapeutic service, which is linked to Team Around the Family. Torvine are interested. Swansea are going to be working with us. And I'm sure there's another. Monmouthshire, haven't heard back from them yet, but they showed initial interest. So we're going to be working with those local authorities and some other voluntary organisations as well, one of which is Cartrefni, which are a wonderful not-for-profit learning disability organisation in North Wales. So we're going to be working with them to pilot the new app, and that's just starting now. Just going back to that's a picture of somebody we worked, and Paul will probably know Ollie. So Ollie has a learning disability. Obviously, he's given his full permission for this image to be shared. Ollie flew with the app. I mean, he absolutely loved using it. And as you can see, one of his goals was to keep fit. And that was a picture that he uploaded. One of the members of staff took it, of him doing the online fitness thing with somebody who I don't know, but some of you might, on the screen. So it was tested, as I say, amongst those 6 houses, 3 children's homes, and also with Denbighshire County Council working Denbighshire scheme. That was part of the phase 1 of the SBRI project. So that was people, part of the Working Wales initiative. So that was people who are supported into work. And as I say, we're testing the new prototype now. Sorry, I'm very aware I'm talking very quickly, and I apologise for that because I'm just having a look on my phone to see. I should have my watch on. Okay, with plenty of time. So it's 25 to. So well ahead of time now. So finally, if anybody wants to contact us, as I say, we're based just near Denby. That's my email address. So roger@here2there.me.uk. Have a look at our website if you're interested, because it tells you mostly what I've already told you, but there's a nice little video on there as well. And it probably does say a few other things about what we're doing. So if you're interested, please have a look at that. So if you do want to contact me, probably email is the best first of all, but there's my phone numbers as well. And then we can have a chat. And so I guess it's just over to questions now, and I'll go out of share.
Thank you very much, Roger. That's really interesting. Lots of questions, I'm sure. One immediately from Yvonne Hutchinson-Ruff, whether you approached Carmarthenshire by any chance to be part of your piloting?
I haven't, but I did have an email either yesterday or the day before from somebody from Carmarthenshire who was interested. So I've had no sort of formal proposal from Carmarthenshire. I mean, it's been difficult. It's been, as often happens, it's networks, isn't it? And we haven't promoted the pilot in any way, so, or advertised it. So it's just through contacts that we've got the interest that we've got so far. But it's certainly, if you want to contact me, and was this the lady who was the team around the family, or is this somebody?
Yes, same person.
Yeah. Okay. So yes, it'd be because of all the project, all the pilots we're going to be doing, for me, this is one of the most interesting, because when I've spoken to Jane, she manages the therapeutic team in Denbighshire, who are linked to Team Around the Family. Her ideas about how to use this within a family context are really interesting. And so I'm hoping we can really test this out. So I'd be happy to discuss that with you further.
Okay, lovely. We've got another question here from Sarah Much. Are the local authorities you're working with teams with disabilities or teams around the family? And have you got any for early years? And I know I'd be really interested to hear something about how it worked in the residential children's homes as well. But the question is from Sarah. Are the teams that you're working with teams with disabilities or team around the family?
Well, they're both. So certainly we've done a lot of work with the learning disability services, both local authority, that was Flintshire, their in-house supported living service, and Cartrefni, not-for-profit, voluntary sector organisation. So we've done a lot of work with them. And that was Flintshire Learning Disability Service in terms of local authority. And as I mentioned, we've got plans to work with, as I say, it's actually I did a presentation to the TAF team, but they had other, professionals in, and it was somebody from the therapeutic team who work with families who was interested in piloting this. So it's officially the therapeutic team, as they're called in Denbighshire, we'll be working with, although there's a close link with the TAF teams as well. So both disability and that. In terms of young people, Alison, just to quickly respond, we piloted it in there, and it was a very mixed bag, and it worked well for a couple of, just backtracking, the first thing was I was amazed how quickly the placing authorities signed up to the idea. I thought we'd have lots of problems with the placing authorities when they were told we were going to use this. And I thought it would take forever to get any agreements, but agreements came through really quickly. So that was positive. It worked really well for a couple of young people. There were issues. We did, one of the staff teams, we did live training. The other one, we just gave a manual to see how well that worked, and it didn't work very well. Again, as I say, some things didn't work when they did the prototype and the pilots, but that's what the pilots are for. I'm very familiar with children's homes. And I used to inspect them, and I used to do quality assurance visits outside of inspection as well, and so I know that type of service very well. And I personally think, I know I would say this, wouldn't I, but I think it could work really well in those settings. So Woodlands, who are going to pilot the new system again, but I think it has lots of potential in that area, and with mental health as well, actually, which we haven't mentioned.
Yeah.
And youth justice. So, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, Sarah specifically said, have you got anyone doing things with early years? And then I've got another comment and question.
Yes, no is the answer to that. I'm not so familiar with early years, although my daughter works in an early years setting, at local authority one. I'm not sure it would work there because the children being supported are young. Often they won't have a smartphone. It can work in that sort of scenario because we had, within learning disability services, we had individuals with a learning disability who had low levels of capacity and understanding and complex needs, and they couldn't use a phone themselves and didn't have the level of understanding to use it. So the staff used the phone on their behalf. So they took pictures of them doing things rather than them doing it themselves. So I guess there could be a possibility in early years settings for that type of approach, but you know, to use it as it's intended to be used at the moment, I'm just not sure. Or I'd be, again, interested in any conversations around how it could work, but just my worry about the age of the children.
Okay, so I've got another comment here from Sean Lewis from ExChange. I have no experience in this area, but as a mum, I can see so many uses for this with children and young people. Could it be adapted for wider use in secondary schools for social wellbeing, education and development?
Definitely, I'll come back to that. I'll just respond. The person who asked about the early years just put a comment up as well about using it from a family perspective rather than the child's perspective. So yes, it could work like that. Sorry, I just saw that your comment pop up.
I didn't see that one.
Yeah, so yes, in schools, in fact, the catalyst for the idea about 2 years ago was when I was doing a review of Denbighshire's youth service, and they were working with schools, and they have school-based youth workers. Interestingly, I'm also doing a review of Conway's track service at the moment. People may be familiar with track. It's support for young people in school up to the age of 16, 11 to 16 typically, who are disengaged or becoming disengaged from school. And that's coming to an end next year, actually, because of it's European funded. But it definitely has potential to be used in schools, specifically around young people who need additional support, not for mainstream young people. I don't think it would work in that type, you know, like everybody in the class having goals, etc. Just because of the resource of supporting them, schools wouldn't have the capacity. But when there's additional capacity available for young people who are disengaged or in danger of becoming disengaged, then definitely it could work in that scenario. And that was actually the initial catalyst for the idea. So yes.
Great. There's a comment from Paul Mazarek here. Just might get a link to Carmarthenshire via Delta Wellbeing in Wrexham, Delta being an arm of Carmarthen County Council.
Okay.
So right. Just to note that.
I mean, maybe you could email me, Paul, with that, and I could follow it up. Thanks for that.
Yeah, I mean, I suppose I'm just thinking, a lot of my research has been in foster care, and I'm doing something about fostering well-being and around the team around the child rather than the family. I'm just thinking how it would work there. And in some senses, you know, it isn't a very joined up team quite often. And the foster carer, who is one of the support networks, is often almost outside of that team. I'm just wondering how might it work, or any thoughts on that, Roger?
Off the top of my head, I think it could work because it's a similar scenario to the team around the family type approach. So, and as I say, the interesting one that's been put to me by Denbighshire, because I've always thought of it, if you take a family scenario, you know, you might have a young person, for example, a young person who's not going to school or disengaged, and where one of the things you might want to do is include their family in that circle of support, amongst others. And I've often thought of it as targeting one individual within a family in particular. But what Denbighshire has said is they would like to use it where, in a sense, all the family have different support needs and potentially different goals, and they're all supporting each other because they're living together. And So that's going to be the interesting thing to try out, which I think could be a similar scenario to the one.
Yeah. I mean, I suppose I can see other things popping up there, but
Yeah.
I'm just thinking, you know, sometimes in the team around the child, there are some players who are not very good or not very active as they should be,
Yeah.
And others who are. And I wonder if it would generate any or galvanize people around that or not.
Yes, I think it sort of turns some people on and some people off. I mean, as we know, some people don't take to social media. And the very thought of it, I know people who don't, and that's fine. You know, no, not touching Facebook with a barge pole. And other people are very switched on by it. I know I'm generalizing here, but I think it often is younger people who use it. Not, they've moved off Facebook now onto other things, but the concept of those other things is still the same. Although I have to say, more older people as well are using Facebook. And interestingly, the demographic for Facebook's changed. Fewer younger people and more people of my age, actually, you know, people in the sort of 60s. So, and because it does things like you can buy and sell stuff on it and things like that. So, yeah. But yeah, so sorry, I'm rambling on here, Alison. But
no, not at all.
just
John has put your email address in the chat for people should they want to contact you.
Right.
I mean, could we have a link to the little video that you've made about it?
It's actually on the website. I mean, it's a little cartoony video, but so it's actually on the homepage of the website.
Is it? Well, perhaps we can find a direct link for people to.
Yeah, I don't know if somebody can just type the website address in the chat as well. So it's obviously www, and then it's here, HERE, 2, and then there, THERE.me.uk. But it's thank you, Sue.
Right, so that's there. So I don't know if there are any further questions for Roger, if there's anything else you're thinking about or thinking of other uses for it. It would be really nice to see one in action, really, wouldn't it?
It would, yeah. I mean, I could have shown you the system live, but there wasn't probably the time.
No.
I mean, I mean, I could still show you some mock-ups of the actual app if you wanted, but it's up to you. But
yeah, I don't know what do people think. Any other? Yes, please, is the answer to that.
I mean, you know, I think we were scheduled for an hour, weren't we? So
we were. So we've got another sort of 10 minutes if you want to, you know, if you think you can achieve that.
This is, I mean, this is a mock-up. These were the designs we did for the new version of the app, which is nearly finished at the moment. So it's not the working app, which I could have shown you, but it's probably better to show you this to give you a feel for it. So I'll try sharing my screen now. So bear in mind there are two aspects to the app. One is the tools, which the organization manages everything with, and they can see everything you're going to see here in the app as well, but they can set up meetings, they can add new users to the system, you know, they can do lots of things with the tools. This is the app that people will have on the phone. So this is for the individual being supported and for their supporters as well. And the new app looks pretty close to this. So when you, presuming people can see that, so
yes, we can. Yes.
When you go in, it's again, people familiar with social media, it looks, we call it the story, but it's often called the timeline. So there is a picture of what, in this case, it's the Ollie picture and what he's up to, and he will have posted that. If we imagine this is the app in use, you can post new things on there. So you can click on there and you can post something. You can add, we're not doing video at the moment, and there are reasons for that, which I'm happy to discuss with people, but you can post a video and you can write something, you know, to create your post. Again, just like normal social media. You'll see here, there's some tabs. So what the individual can do is they can then go from their story and look at their goals. So they can see where they're currently at in relation to their goals. And they can also, if they click on the graph, they can actually see the history. So they can see how they've progressed over time between different reviews. So they're able to see goal progress as well.
So have you got an exemplar of, you know, the bit that said about feelings in the previous?
No, and we haven't finished that. And it's probably going to be just, you know, the emoticon type thing that,
right, yeah,
that type of, you know, which shows a range of, you know, sad face, happy face, etc. So it'll follow that type of process. As I say, there are also actions. So the actions are, the goals are high level goals to get fit, to get a job, but actually what am I going to do to get to achieve those goals? So they can record the actions in there and tick them off when they're completed. Not sure if, no, that's not clickable. So that's the actions. Then there are the meetings. So you can, meetings will be up there, or previous meetings and upcoming meetings. So if there's a planned meeting, it will come up there as well. And you can click into the meeting. There will be a narrative, which will be much longer than this. It will say what the discussion was during the meeting. And then it will show the ratings or the scores. Don't like either of those words, but there isn't any others, against the goals. And as I say, you can print, what it will also do is print off a report, but the report would also include, if you wanted, some of the pictures and the posts that have been put up to support the fact that they've progressed. And then finally is the profile. So these are the questions around what, you know, this is the individual, what they want for the future, when they were inspired to achieve, important for them and to them, etc. And then, so individuals might be supporting other people. So they can actually click on supporting and see a list of all the people they're supporting. This wouldn't often be the case. So for instance, an individual being supported wouldn't normally support others, but they could. And certainly there's the option in the system to for them to do that. And in fact, in learning disability services, it was something that was asked for, that they had some individuals living in one house who could support somebody living in another house. So there is potential for that. If you were just a mentor, and so if you're working in an organization just mentoring people, when you go into the app, that's the home screen. So you would just see the people you're supporting. You would then click on an individual and see their story, their goals, their meetings, and you can go in and out of different people that you're supporting to check how they're doing. And broadly, I think that's it. We are looking at introducing messaging, but that's not in this development, where people within the circle of support can directly message each other, but that's not in the current version. Okay, that's just a quick snapshot.
Thank you. That's really helpful. Actually, it's always good to see it, you know, practically what it's looking like, isn't it? Any other questions or comments from participants?
I mean, the only thing I'll say again is, please, you know, I'm always happy to have a chat with people. You know, there's no, you know, just have a chat. You know, so if you're interested or want to discuss anything, please, I mean, email me in the first case, I think is the best thing, and then we can arrange to have a phone chat or a Zoom. So yeah, fantastic.
Okay, so there's comment here from Sue James. Love the concept, and I can see how this would make this accessible to learners. So that's from Sue.
Great.
Good. Okay, well, that's a really interesting idea. I think I'll have to go away and mull it over and think about the different contexts it could be used in, but I would be particularly interested in thinking about foster care and how it might be used there. Maybe we could have another chat about that, Roger.
Yeah.
Okay, well, thank you so much. Really interesting and innovative approach to thinking about well-being and outcomes. So really good presentation. Thank you very much, Roger.
Thanks, Alison. Thanks for everybody for attending. I know time is precious, so thank you.
Thanks very much.